Alexis, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for inviting me to your channel to talk about AJAX again.
Yeah. So we have another video that we're going to put a link to where we started talking about the introduction to Ajax. And then today we want to talk about Apex server process because we use that a lot when things get more complicated, right?
Yes, it gives you a lot of flexibility.
Right. I love doing dynamic actions, right? Because we can do so many things with no JavaScript. And then if you know a little bit JavaScript, you can do more. But then with Apex Server Process, you have to use JavaScript. And and that can get a little bit more complicated. But I think for today we'll cover some examples similar to what we watched in the previous video, but now we're going to convert them to Apex Server Process and add more logic so we can show how that looks like. Sounds like a
Yes,
plan?
sounds pretty good. And I
Right.
think that it's good to watch the first video if you don't have a good grasp of what is AJAX and everything, because we did a detailed explanation there.
Yeah, absolutely. Share my screen. So first thing I wanted to point out is this is the JavaScript help. I went to the apex.server namespace, and what we're going to cover today is this one, process. And there's others, but process will receive this name and this optional options. And then this is going to be really important. And for those that know more JavaScript, you'll know that this promise, it's a big deal, right? It allows us to do asynchronous calls and chain one call to another and not block the browser. I just want to show how we got there, and I went to apex.oracle.com and I did JS API, and that takes me to the JavaScript documentation, and then you go down here. There's lots of wealth of information here, but in this case Apex server and then process. So that's where we're at. All right. So we have this example where when we switch a department, it's going to run a query and it's going to get what is the location for that department, and it's going to count how many employees exist on that one. And it's actually very straightforward. We saw how that works the last time. There's a dynamic action that when our value changes, or when our department changes, we do a set value, we run the query, and we submit the department so that this query, I'll make this a little bit bigger, so that that query can return the location and the employees. So no JavaScript whatsoever, and then it returns two items, and it will put the values in those two items. Pretty cool example, right? But what if we want to do more than that? So very quickly we started with this query, and actually before we do that, let's talk really quickly about Apex Server Process here, right? So Apex Server Process is going to be a call that first we specify our AJAX callback process. Where is that? When we go to processing, right here under AJAX callback, we're going to create a process, and whatever name you use there is case sensitive. We're going to specify it here, and then optionally we can pass different values. We can pass static values. Well, this could be a variable, a JavaScript variable, but these are single values. We can pass arrays, and we can pass existing page items. What do you use the most, Alexis, when you use these? Do you use them all?
I think that depends to where this process is defined, because it's possible to be defined on the page, but it's possible to be defined to the application level. So if it's something in the page, I normally use the page items, but it's something more global. I rather use the parameters like
Right.
that one.
Right. Now, we don't have unlimited number of these, right? There's only so many of these x01. And the way you can find out if you forget, these values, this x01s are going to be passed, and I think it's mentioned in the documentation, x01. We can see here how we have 20, and they're going to be sent, um, they're going to be received into
Global
Apex
package.
application, right, into a global. Now, let me show you that global real quick. This Apex application package, I opened the spec, and here's the code. And I think you know, Alexis, that Flow was like the original code name or name for Apex, right? So that's what we're going to see Flow in a lot of things. So Apex application is actually a synonym to wwv Flow. And somewhere in here, you can see how this goes way out. Here are our arrays. So if you use xf, like here, f01 is going to get passed into gf01. And you can see the data type that we receive here is an array. And these go all the way to 50. And some special ones for checksums and other things. Check your version of Apex. This goes way back to Apex, I don't know, Apex 4.2, maybe even before. But open that package, do the spec so you can corroborate. And then these ones, we get 20. And you can see they're very large, 32Ks.
It's worth to remember that doesn't matter the data type on JavaScript. What you pass here is going to be converted to varchar. It's always going to be the string. It won't be a number, things like that.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So then this x01, this could be a number, and that number gets converted to a string when it gets placed into this variable. Okay, and then if we're successful making our network call, we can do something, and if there's an error, we can do something else. All right, and then this is where it gets interesting. We can do lots of things. So really quickly, we're going to take our select statement, right here. We're going to take this select statement, and we're going to take this template, and through the magic of video editing, here's what we have. We have our select statement is now returning into two variables. And I'm still going to use the item because we're going to pass the item through Apex server process. And then, because JSON is pretty cool and easy to use, we're going to use Apexjson to return some structure that looks like this with our location, our number of employees. And if we open the API for JSON, there's many options here. Basically, OpenObject just writes a little curly to open the JSON. And this write will write this portion, and this write will write the other, right? Yeah. Now, this is not positional, right? I could move this to be after or before, right? So it doesn't matter how we write our attributes. Yes. So this we have to write into our AJAX callback, and I already kind of have my AJAX callback here. Here's exactly that code. It's valid. So let's do our first implementation of this. I'm gonna delete this. Now remember, it's getting placed into this two items, location and employees. So we need the Apex server process part. So I'm gonna add a new true action that's gonna be JavaScript. Execute JavaScript. And what goes here? Well, because we don't want you to wait for a lot of code. I have my AJAX callback. I have the AJAX callback here, and we're passing page items. We pass p13 dep number, and actually we're not going to use a data type text. The default is JSON, so just by removing that, we're going to expect this success is going to receive our JSON down here. And this is super interesting. Our JSON, we can do data dot on our JSON stuff. So let's bring the JSON over just to visualize it. We're going to put it here, right? So this is what we're expecting. We're expecting location. So data is going to have this object, and we're going to grab location, and I'm going to set it into an item. And this number of employees is going to set it here. This should work, right?
It looks like yes.
I'm going to put it here. Click OK. So now I don't need this one. I'm going to delete it. All right. I'm going to save the page. Let's see how many errors we have. I'm going to clear that. If it's correctly, when I switch this, look at that.
Huh?
You get, and operations was Boston and 0, New York and 3. Isn't that cool? And if we see our network calls, we have this AJAX calls where I'm getting that location back. Here's the JSON we were talking about, right? And on the headers, we can see where items to submit is that item. So Apex still doing a lot for us. It's passing our values, is keeping session state. When this comes back, it gets passed to our Apex server process. The data receives, and we place it in our elements. Now, if you notice, we don't get any spinners now, right, Alexis?
Yes, we need the loading indicator to give a feedback.
Yeah, let's give some feedback. Now, to do that, there's a loading indicator. Actually, I have it on my loading clipboard here. Loading indicator. And let's try different things, right? Alexis, before you were telling me let's put it on those. Let's put it on location.
Yes, I think you could put a jQuery selector in an object in a function returning a selector.
Ah, yeah, okay. It could be a function return a selector. Okay. So would this work?
Shouldn't the comma to be inside because it will be a selector?
The comma. No, the comma is
exception. Oh no, right? I thought they were asking me to add more items next to the comma. No.
Oh yeah, right. Well, let's try one.
One, yeah, of course.
Let's see if we're putting it in the right place, because sometimes we don't get the structure right.
Yes, I always do that, one at a time.
Yeah, don't try too many things. Okay, so it's still loading.
Well,
okay.
We are back.
All right. So, there it is. You saw that?
Yes.
We have a loading indicator. Oh. So that's interesting. You see how we don't see it anymore?
Yes.
It's actually an optimization. There's a function that Apex says if it's super fast, don't even show it.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, just kind of nice. But we can let's add the other item, and actually let's add our P13. So let's add it everywhere. Let's see how that looks. I'm not recommending you do this. I just want to see how that works, right? So we'll put all three of them.
Yes.
Okay. No, it's
Need to
happening
be
too fast.
slower.
Yeah. You know how you create slowness?
Well, I have a couple of options in mind, but I'll look
There's
and I
actually
will
a uh,
sleep.
Apex. Yeah, Apex is a util and it's asleep.
Yes. I didn't want to say that because many people could try it. I don't know.
Pause. There you go. So this is adding a 1 second pause. There it is. Now we see all three.
Yes.
Very nice. So I don't know if we want all three, but that way you know we can do that, right? Now I don't know if you noticed, but when the page loads, it doesn't display the original value, right?
With the attributes.
So that's a simple one. We know that from the dynamic action, we want this to fire on initialization. So now when we first run, there it is. Perfect. Okay. Now, this was a lot of code to do something that we were doing declaratively, right? So the reason to do this is to do something more interesting. So let's say that why don't we add when the operation is 0, we're going to tell them that they're going to assign this employee to a location with no employees, right? We can do that many ways, but I don't know what you're thinking. I was thinking of having a region here just to give an alert.
Yes, that's okay.
Yeah,
I got to say that
tell me.
despite we are going to use this approach with server process, things like this is still possible to use only dynamic actions because we have the wait for results. So you could wait for the item value and after that execute JavaScript like we showed in the first video.
Yeah,
Yes, but
yeah.
if you have something more, you need more control. It's pretty good, that one.
So let's do something like that. Let me add uh, 2 regions here. Blank this, column 2, start a new row. Okay, I'm gonna move done. So it looks almost the same, but now I have space, right? More stuff I would do more, but we're gonna say warning. You're assigning and this is gonna be an alert. Actually, I'm gonna highlight the background and let's just put it like that. So right now that alert is always being displayed. Oh, it's down here. It was meant to be in
The column.
okay. So as Alexis was saying, we could actually have a dynamic action here that when the value changes and if the item is 0, if the value is 0, we're gonna display it. So we're gonna show the region warning, right? And I'm gonna create the opposite. This should work.
Yes, it should.
So if I go to operations, it shows. Is that cool?
Good.
But let's do it
On the other way.
the hard way. So I'm gonna delete this. Go back to our JavaScript code, and then we're gonna say if I'm gonna use data num employees, right? If that's a 0, then we're going to, and guess what? We need a static ID on that region, right?
That region, yes.
Well, let's assume we give it something, but apex region, and it's going to be, I'm just going to call it warning region. Can I just do a show?
I think.
Oops. And hide.
Hide.
Okay. Now we needed to hide at the very beginning, so I'm just gonna cheat right now, and when page loads, we're gonna hide it
Yes.
from the very beginning.
But you could put the style set to hidden.
Yes. Okay.
Medium,
That's another good way to do that.
and that yes,
That would be even better.
custom
So,
attributes.
and custom attributes,
Yes.
style, display block, right?
If you want to show it, but I think you don't want to show it at
Right.
the beginning. So
Right.
display known. No,
Yeah,
style is okay.
right.
Display
It
known.
is style. We do display none.
Yes.
Okay. So if we do that, we really don't need this.
Yes. And actually, if you execute that on page loads, it's going to blink. So it's good to put that on the style because that will avoid the blinking at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good point. There. So it's not, oops, we have an error. You see that? Hide is not a function. Okay.
Yes. Normally, I was going to use a jQuery, which
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll probably do that.
but you already have the static, so you only need to call hide on the object.
Yeah, but we need to convert this to a jQuery, right?
Yes.
That's dumb. So do we, let's just do this.
Yes.
We'll do show. There. So that will show it, right? So we'll switch our code. Coding live. So we show it here.
And 200 to avoid to show fast.
We hide it.
If you put a number inside, you're going to be better. It will look like hide 200 milliseconds.
Oh, yeah. We want to show like this.
Yes, is one.
Let's do 200.
Yes.
Yeah, 200 milliseconds.
Yes.
250. There you go. we'll hide it immediately.
Yes, that's good.
When we're hiding it, we don't want to show the warning. Perfect. No errors. Let me close this so we can see it. Operations. There it is. And you saw how it slid down? That was that delay.
Yes.
And now we can get rid of let's get rid of our pause. I'm just going to comment it out. And I don't need to reload the page. I'm not even going to reload. Why? Because this is, every time we switch, this is a brand new AJAX call. There. Operations. Remove.
Yes.
So the beauty here, as you saw, we could have done all of it still with dynamic actions. But this can add complexity. We can do lots of other things. We can refresh a page. We can maybe open a model. I don't know. There's lots of complexity you can add to this. Go ahead.
And sometimes, if you see something very complex, despite that you could use many dynamic actions, it could be better to have everything on a block of code on functions and everything. You could be calling that. So you go to a place and you see what is happening in only one place. Because if you have many dynamic actions, there are pages, is very complex and big. It could be difficult to trace where it's going to each thing. So it's, there's an on-change here, there's another thing here, and it's difficult to debug.
We're gonna call it, that would be the spaghetti code, right?
Yes.
If you have too many things, it can be a real spaghetti code. And now I'm just switching this to clean it up. Our code could be in a file. I'm going to have a function here. and this would be all of our Apex server process code. So now our dynamic action is very, very clean. We can encapsulate the logic, and it still all works, right? Should we talk about the OCD reorder? I don't know if we talked about it this video yet.
Not in this video.
Have I talked to you today about my OCD reorder?
No, but I think it's a good time to do it now.
The OCD reorder, you can find it on GitHub, and I'm going to put a link on the show notes, on the video notes. Basically, you select a table and you can drag a column and it reorders and it executes this alter statements that are going to basically shuffle your column. But you can shuffle many columns as well. So the way it works is that I'm going to just do an AJAX, here. So if I move one column, one position, there's an AJAX call here that submits this arrays, the F01 array. And I'm actually submitting the whole order, the new order of my columns. So I moved one column here, so you can see how 5 and 6 got swapped, 6 and 5, right? So the way it's working, here's our AJAX callback, and Apex will call it by saying application process equal to our AJAX callback name. This is our parameters. And I'm going to receive the parameters, and we're going to loop through them and reorder the table. So let's look at this code. Now this code is a little bit harder to see here because it's all in a file. There's nothing here. It's all in P1.js. So let me open that P1.js. So here's my update order. My update order, it's a call to a package that's going to receive the table that is being reordered. But I don't pass the order here because inside this package, let's look at the package. Oh, inside this package, we have that Apex application, and we're going to loop through our positions, our GF01. Now, we're not going to go through the complexity of the code. You can examine the code. Basically, it's going to do those alter statements. Somewhere in here, I am building alter table, table name, we're modify, we're going to make them visible or invisible. Those are the commands that are being ultimately executed, okay? But on the Apex server process, I'm going to pass that F01 with the new order. And if it's successful, I check success again. You know what that is? I don't know if we talked about this, Alexis. So this success, I was saying that this success is just a network success that we're able to go back and forth.
Yes.
So this success comes from my JSON. Just like we created the JSON for the other one, I have a JSON here where I return true if it's successful, and then I return the full SQL that was executed. That's why in the app, let's close this. I have the alter statements here. These are the SQLs that I got returned.
I think that it's worth to mention that despite we are saying returning everything, that's not a function. When you need to return something to the JavaScript on the AJAX call, you don't use returns on the PL SQL. You use the HTTP buffer, So on this moment, Apexjson is writing that object to the buffer. And after that, Apex will handle that and will expose whatever you send on that data, will expose that as a parameter to the JavaScript, and you will be able to use that. So if you want to return a string or things like that, you don't need to use the word on PL SQL return. If now you use http.p.
Yep. And this is a lot of information that you share there. That's super important. We are writing to that buffer, the HTML buffer. Basically, these calls, when they come back, let's just do that move again. When this calls come back, this response is just something written to the buffer, right? It can be as complicated as we want. And Apexjson is writing this, but we could just do HTTP and say okay, right? Or whatever we want, or we can write like column delimited stuff, right? You can return all sorts of things. So this open object, for example, all it's doing is writing a curly bracket to open our object. Now these writes will escape values so that it's proper JSON, but basically this gets translated somewhere to an HTTP call to write it back. Yes. Yeah, very, very key information.
And here it's good to remember that if you're not returning a valid JSON object, as Jorge said before, you need to change the type on your JavaScript to say that your AJAX code, that your PL SQL won't return a JSON, it will return a string if you are expecting a string.
Yeah, what was it, text, I think we saw?
Yes, it was text.
You add this, so the default now is JSON, right? But you add this data type text, and now whatever comes back from that buffer, this information from the buffer, it's not interpreted as JSON. It's just plain text, and you can do whatever you want with it. Okay.
Yes.
So in this example, that success translates to this variable in this attribute in JSON. I'm going to see if it's successful, and then I'm going to show a success message on the page. Otherwise, I'm going to show an error on the page, and I'm going to have another attribute that's going to have the error. This is the PL SQL error that may be generated. Yes. Let me go ahead. Shoot.
No, that attribute message in everything is Jorge who is handling that and exposing that. Natively, Apex won't expose you with that message like that on the data object with the error. What's happening is because Jorge is going to show now how he's handling the section and writing to the buffer when something happens, so he has a meaningful message to show to the users.
So my JSON never executes. Actually, I could let it execute. It really doesn't matter, because I could put it here at the bottom. I'm forcing an error, so it's going to fall into my exceptions. My success is going to be false, and my message is going to be the column I was processing and the SQL error message. So let's see how that looks. Down here, that's going to be where we're going to see the error. So let me do that. And there it is. Okay. So here's what's happening actually. So we actually got this error. I did return a message that says updated by, forcing an error, and what it was trying to do. Okay, but my JSON was not correct anymore. Why is that?
It's because despite we got the error, we are not opening and closing another object. And when you got exception, the buffer is not cleared.
Thank you. That's a bug in my code, right? If you see here, because I moved it below, what happened is I did write this to the buffer, and then I wrote this to the buffer. So if I move this up, we should see the error, right? Now the better way would be to clear the buffer.
Yes.
So now I'm just going to reload the page just so that it starts clean. I'm going to move this again below so we can see this here. So I'm going to try to move. Okay, column updated, and then we see the error, right? Forcing error. And this mess is this stuff. This is what it was trying to do. It actually did it, and then there was an error. So it all depends how you want to handle the errors, right? We're just showing that you can trap them and show them. Remember how you clear the buffer?
I don't remember exactly which is the the line of code.
Yeah. We're not gonna get into that, but there's an Apexjson call or an HTTP call. We can clear the buffer.
And I think I remember there's a package on the database after 12 that you could create JSON objects, and after that you could create them, and if you want you could send that to the buffer, which atp.p. But for example, this one Apexjson is writing directly to the buffer on each line. But on the other one, I remember that it's a database package object. I don't remember. You write the JSON, you have that, and you could get that as a string or
Yeah. Actually, let's see. We go to /API. We're gonna look at Apexjson. I think I know what you're talking about, but this is semi-related. Let's go here to Apexjson. There's actually initialized club output. Instead of making each of these calls be a HTTP call, this whole JSON could be written to a club if we add this initialized club output at the very beginning of our call, like this. Initialize club output, and then these do not write to the buffer, and then you gotta free the output to free the club, and then you do a Apexjson get club output. So what this means is it makes the JSON write to a club. This only goes to a club internal to the package. With this we get it out and we write it, and then we free it up. Now that's within JSON, but still, what was the way to free the buffer? We'll have to figure that out. I don't remember. I don't want to distract from what we're doing right now.
yes. I think that it was JSON object. That's the name of the database, but it's not related to Apex. But you could use it, and it's good.
Okay. And here you can see how I write the code that I executed, getting it from data.sql, and then I refresh my region of columns. So this is a report, and it refreshes. So if I do the drag, there's a new refresh here that if you see it, these are my columns. If I do the preview, you can see how this is a report. It has a custom template, but this is the report that gets displayed. And of course, this error should have been removed. I have another bug there where I'm not removing. I should have done this clear messages before. Anyway. Finally, Alexis, we should talk about this, right?
Oh yes, about the chain.
Yeah. So first, what is this WP? Let me just explain that super quick. It turns out that there's this. We can block the screen if I just call this. I have a spinner. Now I can't click anywhere. I can't get rid of it. So when I'm reordering, I start a spinner. Now, this starts the spinner. And I save a pointer to the spinner in this wait pop-up variable. WP is for wait pop-up, okay? So down here I say always. Always means I don't care if I was successful or if there was an error, I need to remove the spinner. That's basically what this code is. So let's do that. Let me just assign that to a variable. I'm gonna just call it WP. Okay, so now I can do WP remove to get rid of that spinner.
That's a useful technique, because as we have been saying, when you use asynchronous JavaScript and everything, the user is not blocked. So if you don't use these techniques, for example, to put a overlay around your page and everything, the user could be doing other things while you are waiting for an answer from the server. So to avoid that, we need to use techniques like this, which doesn't block the thread of execution of JavaScript, but block the user to do something on your application while you should be waiting for something else.
It's important what you said. It only blocks the user. It's actually a div. This wait overlay is really just a div that has some color. Here you can see how I could make it very ugly, right? It's really just I'm just blocking with a div, and all I gotta do is destroy that div with that remove to get rid of it. Alexis, what I realized is that this reorder, sometimes if my server was slow, it could take a little bit of time. So a user would reorder one column and then they would be reordering another one. See how it's still spinning? I still have that error in there, but they would be reordering one and then they would try to reorder another one. And I was still not done with the first one, and it would lead to this very strange behavior.
Yes, exactly.
Getting back to this is a promise. Basically, Apex Server Process. This is dot is chaining with Apex Server Process. Apex Server Process will return a promise, and promises can be used in JavaScript to do actions after they come back when they're ready. In this case, I'm saying always. I don't care if it was a failure or success, I will always remove the overlay that's blocking the screen. But there are others. You want to try to share yours?
Okay, we have here which is the same code Jorge was showing us, which is this. But there are another flavors. There's another syntax that you could use to have kind of the same behavior, and you could see it on another base codes in another projects, developers using this. For example, this function is returning a promise in a jQuery object. You could use this, and what you pass here is equivalent to what you pass here. But Jorge was telling me before this that this is not handling PL/SQL errors. So that means because a PL/SQL error, Apex doesn't trigger that like it was an error, actual AJAX errors. If not, the server is actually returning something, the probably was an error on the PL/SQL. This one is going to be always executed. So if you are using this syntax, you will need to handle the error inside this function. On the other side, that when you have this syntax that, well, on this code wasn't here, but you have something like this, and you have another function here.
Right.
This one is going to be executed if you have a PL/SQL error. Now we have the other syntax, which is this. This one was added to jQuery when the support for promises on the browsers got native. So which is the main difference between this one and this one? If you only have one call, it's not a big difference. But if you want to do chaining, the difference is that then it's returning another promise. So if you return here another promise, you could change many actions. So for example, I'm thinking on a good use of this. If you need to refresh or insert something, maybe a loading bar on 4 steps, and after that you return something to the user, you send another AJAX call, and you are chaining X call, it's possible to do it with them. You write then the function which is going to be executed. After that, you could execute another AJAX callback, so another AJAX call, and put then, and when that promise resolved, so that means that AJAX is returned by the server with a success, you execute something else. So it's possible to have this different syntax to handle AJAX and promises with the Apex server process.
So said another way, that then allows us to get back to being synchronous, doing one thing first, then the next, without blocking the browser. The browser is not blocked, it's just when something finishes, the then allows that next action or next piece of code to execute when the first one finishes.
Yes, exactly, because it's not only that it looks like synchronous code, which is good because that was one of the first things that motivate the people to create the promises. Because when you are using many callbacks, you are using chaining. For if you are doing, I don't know, like 4 AJAX calls in a row, you are going to be going. You need to pass 4 functions like callbacks, another function here, another level, and that becomes so difficult to handle. So the difference is to implement that callback. That is a very common case in JavaScript, which is called the callback help. You could use them, which looks more easy to read because it's easy to spot that after this function, this one is going to be executed, and if you have another one, this one is going to be executed after that function. So it's more readable and easy to maintain. But despite that, it looks like asynchronous code here. If after this JavaScript piece of, if you have something like console log or something else, I'm only making up something, saying hi, this one is going to be executed, but the hi is going to be executed after the first call, not after all the then, because this is still a synchronous code, which is not blocking the main thread.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you had console log goodbye in the first then, you would see, or if you had goodbye at the end, actually, let's put hi on the, like you would see, instead of saying hi goodbye, you would see. So let's do let's say that one be hi. Yeah, that's good. And okay, then the bottom one should be goodbye, right?
Oh, you're talking about this one?
Yeah, yeah. Or bottom, that's fine.
Okay.
So if we run this code, it's actually gonna say bottom first, and then it's gonna say hi, because the code above is gonna take some amount of time to execute, right? Bottom will run immediately.
Yeah, and if you want this code to be executed after the high, if between the high and the bottom there is another server call, you could easily put it on another event because you're returning another promise. But if not, you could move it here.
Right. Yeah.
So that's everything from this side.
I think this has been really good to explain Apex server process and get people started on understanding it. Now, keep in mind, the examples we used were simple enough that we could have still used dynamic actions. But it gives you an understanding of how, if you have more complicated scenarios, you could use Apex Server Process to have complete control over what you're doing step by step.
Absolutely. I agree with that.
Alexis, thank you very much for joining me today and helping explain Apex Server Process.
My pleasure. See you on the next video.
All right. Bye-bye. Take care.